So we're gonna just dive right into our
Uh,
video. Um, Andrea, you have a large presence on Instagram, right? Sharing your stories about taking care of your mom who has early onset dementia. But you were also recently on, I guess it wasn't super recent because they were filming over a couple of years, right? But
Yes.
a documentary on PBS called Matter of Mind. So we got sent a screener of that. So we were able to watch it. And I thought that'd be great to connect with a couple of you who are in the movie to talk about it since it's now out, or it's actually out tonight. Uh,
Tonight, yes.
so everyone will be watching it. We talked to Janice as well, who was in the movie, and she'd mentioned started filming in 2022. Is that kind of when you all started filming as well?
Yes, yeah. So it was 2 year long when they first from the process of interview to now, it's actually been a little over 2 years.
Wow.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your segment of the film also focused on a big change for y'all, which was your move too.
Yes.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
was that like? What was that timeline like? I feel like there was like
Mm.
a 9 month jump at some point, right?
So when everything was kind of I feel like it felt like a big whirlwind and a quick turnaround when it came from the last time that we filmed before the move and when the move actually happened. So I would say it was probably maybe like a 6 month time span or so. And when the crew was in Ludington, which was where I was living at previous to
Mhm.
now, I had made it clear that I was looking for another job at that point and looking to move to a little bit of a bigger city just to be closer to resources, support. Where we were living was very isolated. I didn't have any friends there. I didn't have any family there. I just had work and my mom caregiving. And, you know, being a property manager at that time, it's just like I was always on
Right.
and I needed to be in an office. So, long story short, it just wasn't conducive to the evolution that was happening in front of me and the way that my life was changing and my mom was changing constantly. So, I made the decision to find another job that actually gave the opportunity for me to move here to Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is a little bit closer to her doctors and neurologists and just resources in general. That entire process was the most trying, the most honestly sad, confusing, depressing, draining process ever.
Yeah.
That's just the way that it is,
Yeah.
or that's the way that it was. It was, you know, you never know how big changes are really going to affect your loved one when they have Alzheimer's because the way that Alzheimer's shows up and how it evolves in each loved one can look very, very different.
Sure.
With my mom, she practically went from night and day difference in her speech, in her, when it came to her ability to clothe herself, to bathe herself. It was just such a drastic decline after we had moved. Her whole disposition, her mood, it was like I was starting the caregiving process all over again and with a completely different person. It it rocked my world, to be absolutely honest, especially because I was also getting acclimated to a new role, a new company, a heavy role at that point. And so uh, yeah, it was a process.
Yeah, and you touched briefly in the film too, of course, like they can only fit so much in the span of time that like your part of the story, is allotted. But
Mhm.
touch briefly on how the work from home switch, which you had been like, so focused on attaining to be able to better care for your mom. And then there really seemed to be this sort of learning curve. And you were then dealing with like, okay, but I'm still working. And then,
Mhm.
like you said, for your mom to experience this decline because of the move, and her surroundings being unfamiliar, that must have been a lot to juggle.
Absolutely. The thing about caregiving is that you don't know what you don't know. If you've never
Yeah.
been a caregiver specifically to someone with Alzheimer's before, everything is new. You're just kind of rolling with the punches the best you can. And I didn't know what working from home would look like with my mom's new decline because I wasn't anticipating the decline to be
Right.
that bad. And so she needed a lot more attention. She was so used to it being just her and I. And so you add in the fact that I had a very demanding job where even though I was home, I was in meetings some days from 9 a.m. all the way up until 5,
Yeah, I think
back
people
to back.
like forget that working from home is not, when COVID first happened, I'd worked from home for a long time and people were like,
Mhm.
"Oh, working from home, that sounds great. Like
Yeah,
do whatever you want." It's like, not really,
not really,
not
not
really.
really.
Like it's not this magical like freedom. It is, I think, way better than having to commute to an office and sit there and
Absolutely,
do the same kind
absolutely.
of thing. But like a lot of times you are, sometimes we're in front of the computer for hours
Hmm.
on end. And so it's like,
Hmm.
yes, I'm physically at home, but like having to care for your mom, you may not actually have, like that time freedom. I think sometimes people think if they've never worked from home, they don't realize like it's hard. It's actually
Absolutely, absolutely. And as someone who didn't previously work from home, I was one of those people that
okay.
thought, oh, it's going to be so nice. I'm just going to casually breeze over into my kitchen and have a snack. And, I'll take a little break for a little walk once in a while. And it was not like that at all. It was, I feel like in a sense, it was almost a little bit more intense because people automatically expect that you have more space and
Yeah.
time
Yes.
in your schedule and more attention because you aren't distracted by, people coming in and out of your office and what have you. So I feel like there's a certain expectation from colleagues as to how your time is divided. But
Right.
just like I didn't realize what working from home was going to be like as a caregiver, colleagues and other people outside of my home don't know what it's like to be someone who works from home and is a caregiver.
Right.
It's different. And so it was a huge learning curve of just figuring out how to, number one, lean into asking for help. I had moved my aunt in with us. She's the only other family member near me, which is my mom's sister.
Right.
And so that also added to a different dynamic, and I think was also confusing to my mother, like, who is this other presence? Because she doesn't recognize my aunt as her sister. And so really kind of navigating that dynamic as well, and just learning a different level of asking for help, being okay or having to learn how to disassociate when I'm on a Zoom call and I'm hearing my mom and my aunt kind of be at odds because
Yeah.
Alzheimer's and misunderstandings and things like that. And me having to be on a call and just while I'm
Yeah.
hearing all of this stuff right outside
Yeah.
my
And you're
door.
hearing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a long learning curve.
Yes, we worked. We had a support group for a little while, a couple years ago, or a year ago at this point, and we had a woman who was also, in her 30s or 40s, and she's taking care of her mom with early onset, and she worked from home, and she would say like, all of a sudden it would get quiet, and she's like, "Uh-oh,
Mm-hmm.
what is she
Yep.
doing?" And
You
she,
sense
yeah.
your spidey senses. You sense a disturbance in the force, and you're like, I don't know what's going on, but something's happening. Yeah.
They've gotten into something, they're doing something like, and she would come
Mm-hmm.
in and her mom would have like emptied all the stuff out of the fridge or whatever, but she would like hear her in the
Mm-hmm.
kitchen and then suddenly it's silent. She's like, "Oh my God, what is going on in there?"
Yeah.
She'd be trying to work, but
Yeah.
hard to do.
Yeah. It's an interesting balance. Like, how do your attention is divided, and yet how do you have attention on something that you can't keep your eyes on all the time because you have to be present for your job? It's
Right.
tricky. It's tricky.
Andrea, I was hoping you could speak to what it's like being a content creator in this space. In the film, you talk about it being sort of an outlet. And as somebody
Mhm.
who like I do social media for Dementia by Day, right? So I see it as my
Mhm.
channel. And it's sort of it can, even though it's fun and I love it, it can take a lot out of me. So
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak to that part of it. Does it ever feel exhausting, but then you feel like you have a duty to your followers? What is that relationship like?
Absolutely. I would say my relationship with content creation has definitely ebbed and flowed. Um, prior to prior to me ending my relationship with my job to be able to focus on my mom full time, I was at a point of burnout all around,
Mm,
and just honestly in every area in my life. And so showing up as a content creator, which doesn't showing up as someone who's just sharing my life felt so draining, so exhausting, felt too vulnerable because I was in a place where I was not doing well.
Yeah.
And I felt this need not for perfection because thankfully like the people that are my people on social media are not they don't care about perfection or always looking good and looking bright and looking healthy and all of those things. Like they're such amazing humans, but the reality of it is that when you put yourself out there, and especially as you start to gain momentum and like people are noticing you, it's just the way that it is that people start to draw from your strength. They start to draw from your experience. They really invest themselves in your life, and though that's the part that I appreciate and I'm honored to be a part of, it also kind of sometimes makes you feel like you're giving tiny pieces of yourself to thousands of people. And for a long time, I didn't know the balance between being having space for me
mhm.
to process things while also being there for others so that I can process things publicly in order to normalize the process of caregiving, normalize the hard parts. Because that's what I feel like is the magic of my account and the reason why people have enjoyed connecting with me is the fact that I have shared so much of the processes and the fears and the
Mhm.
sadness as I was going through it in real time. And so people felt less isolated and less like they were the only ones going through it and less on an island. And I wanted to keep that dynamic, but I'm like, how much do I share? Because right now I'm in the thick
Yeah.
Right.
of depression, of anxiety. I'm feeling very fragile. And how much of that do I share with people and also be able to support my continued health and also not trauma dump on
Yeah.
people. And that can be
Yeah.
tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it's a vulnerable place to be. Obviously, we're coming at the dementia care content from a different angle, and I'd say predominantly, our audience are both caregivers and like senior living professionals as we work with senior living companies. Um, but so we have this Instagram. I also have like obviously my own personal Instagram. I had a very traumatic birth experience for my
Mm-hmm.
son who's happy and healthy now and almost two. Um, but I like documented the most of the entire thing like while I was in the hospital with a C-section and everything. And I kept documenting mostly like only on my personal account. But even
Mm-hmm.
that, it was kind of I was not doing well mentally. I was
Yeah.
not doing well. Um, but it felt like I almost had to share some of it. Like I felt like people need to know this is a thing that like you don't
Mm-hmm.
just automatically have this massive life change and you're just like I'm feeling great.
Right.
Like I think women are sort of, especially when you have a child, that you sort of felt like you have to be happy about it, like you have to be doing
Absolutely.
well and you have to be succeeding, and I was not doing
Mm-hmm.
well, and I didn't even want to put on a facade. And there were times where I had my mom be like, are you sure you want to share all of this?
Mm.
And I was like, I kind of don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
I feel like I sort of have to put this out there. Um, but it does make you vulnerable. And I see like people commenting on your posts, and they're not sharing obviously so much about their caregiving experience, but they love seeing you share. And a lot of times you
Hmm.
do share from like almost a humorous person
Hmm.
as well. And I think that's
Hmm.
really cathartic for people. And
Hmm.
I'm sure like that's a big piece of what people are responding to is like, you know, she's very real. Like you're very real on there. And I think that's really important for people to see, and probably why people
Yeah.
are really like connecting with the content.
And it makes sense that that would be a double-edged sword for you, Andrea,
Yes.
like you mentioned, that it's sort of then a drain because you're
Hmm.
that person that people are seeing themselves reflected in. Yeah.
Yeah,
You are
absolutely.
not, are you doing that full time now then? So you're
Yeah.
full time caregiving. Okay, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I am. And I'm still feel like I'm getting my footing with it. Because people, I think that especially people that are just starting, have just started to follow me, to them, when if people are starting right now, they
Mm,
see me as an influencer or a content creator, but that was never my goal. That was
right.
never the reason why I started sharing. And I'll be completely honest, only up until maybe the past couple months have I really started to identify myself as I call myself a care creator. Um, and that's only because I've really started to focus more on sharing intentionally, because I am home full time with my mom, and which is kind of a blessing because it means that I'm experiencing a whole different phase of caregiving right now,
Yeah.
and which has its own challenges and upsides. And so I just want to continue to be able to share that experience as well, because caregivers will go through all these crazy different evolutions of what their journey will look like. And this is a part of mine right
That
Mhm.
is such a wild part of content creation that you essentially are sort of having to introduce yourself over and over
now.
again because
Yeah.
people are continuing to find you and you have already been through, so much on your journey, but now people are just joining you at this point in time and it's completely different than if they had followed you a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have anybody helping you, Andrea, or is it you, yourself, and you?
Just as far as the social media piece, just me. I do just recently, as I am building exciting things for caregivers right now, I have received some help in the design aspect, from an amazing human that's helping me to create some merch, basically, and wearables for caregivers that are fun, that give the message of what caregiving is like, but in a way that's still hopeful and lighthearted, and ways that we can be able to express ourselves, in fun wearable items. So in that aspect, I have gotten some help, because Lord knows I'm not a designer. Put me in front of a camera, but designing, no. But social media is all me.
Send us the links. We'll definitely promote that with this video.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah.
I have sort of an inside baseball question about the film. And I asked Janice
Absolutely.
the same thing. I was really curious about how your mom reacted to having the cameras and the crew
Mm.
around and everything, because she seemed to love being interviewed.
Yeah, yeah, she did. She did at first, for sure. I feel like for a long time she was mostly good, with the interviewing, and then decline started to hit when we were still in Ludington, and it became harder and harder for her to focus, harder and harder for her to kind of take directions, and and then after the move, you'll really see the decline at that point, from the first interviews, where she's very communicative and expressive
Yeah.
and playful. And So people think, oh, she's a sprightly person with Alzheimer's. Like she's still doing good, but she's so different, so completely different now. But for a long time, it was good until, Alzheimer's kicked in a little bit more, and then it was a challenge, and it created such anxiety for me because I was constantly aware of the fact that she was feeling confused as to why cameras were in her face or
Mm.
why people were following her around or why she had this mic thing attached to
Oh,
her.
yeah.
And, it was all very scary and overwhelming. But thankfully, the film crew is amazing. They're amazing humans who also have had their own experiences with people who have neuro diseases as well. So they were so
Mm.
patient. They went at our pace. They were just intuitive of when to like kind of back off and give space. And so that really did help a lot with the process.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There was a moment where we saw your mom talk about you like you weren't you,
Mhm.
and kind of experience what we call timeline confusion. This idea that, it's not that they don't know you, it's not that they don't love you, they just are sort of existing on a different timeline.
Yeah.
Is that something that's happening more, or have you kind of felt, seen that happen a little bit more, or was it sort of a one-off?
So prior to that moment, it had started happening more often. I would say probably a good year, even prior to that filming, it was starting to happen more
Mm.
often where she wasn't understanding that I was me or I was Andrea. Like, yeah, I know you're Andrea, but my other Andrea.
Yes.
And so I was kind of split into two different people.
Right.
But I mean, she's so far along in the disease at this point that she doesn't know who I am at all. She once in a great blue moon, she'll say my name
Hmm.
and it will be very surprising. Um, and even when she says my name, it's not necessarily like she's saying it to me about me. It's just kind of like a random one-off. But at this point, she does not know anything about who I am.
Yeah. She
Yeah,
can't maybe place you on that timeline, but
right.
she knows you exist. You're
Yeah,
obviously very, very important to her.
yeah,
She might just be looking for a baby version of you, and obviously you're not a baby, so that
yeah.
may be part of um
Absolutely,
that.
absolutely. You never know. She doesn't really mention Andrea in general anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so it's just very interesting because you hear all the stories of how um a lot of caregivers that I know they talk about how their loved one talks about their family home. I want to go home, or they
Yeah.
talk about their parents, and my mom doesn't really ask those questions. She doesn't at this point. So it's very interesting. I'm always curious to know what world she's in, what timeline she's in, because
Yeah.
she doesn't really indicate much.
It's
But
probably in some ways a little bit easier that she's not constantly asking to
yeah,
go home, because that is
absolutely.
one of the biggest things that we get asked is like, what do I do? When someone's like, I want to go home, want to go home, want to go home. Um, and that becomes a challenge. So what is she talking of? What does she talk about? Kind of just what's happening in the present.
So the way that she verbalizes now is very, very broken,
Okay.
and not often um, like very intelligent at all. Um, so she talks in like broken sentences. A lot of the stuff just does not make sense.
Okay.
So her communication that you've seen in the beginning of the film,
Not where we're at. It was
not
the
at
same
all.
thing with Janice and Sue. She said, Sue is in a very different place than
Mhm.
when they were originally filming, because it's been a few years at this point.
Yeah.
Did they sort of did they plan, the film crew, did they plan times to come back to visit with you and to film? Okay, and so you kind of collaborated on like day
Yeah.
schedules and things like that. Okay.
Yeah. I think Uh, I can't totally remember because the last time that we filmed would have been, I think, a little over a year ago because it wasn't long after we had moved. Um, and I think that they did. let's just say maybe 4 visits, and it would be for a few days at a time.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
Andrea, what are you hoping for the audience to get from the film and from your and your mom's story? What message?
I think from the film in general, one of the common threads is how passionate each one of us caregivers are about keeping our person's humanity and
Mm,
their identity and keeping them engaged in things that they love and that's a part of their personality and things that light them up and just really, really focusing on humanizing the person with Alzheimer's instead of
mm,
their just being the narrative of dying, right? Uh, that there's also, we understand the dying process, but there's still also life that's being lived and a life that can be experienced differently, but a life regardless. And I think you see a little bit of that narrative in the documentary, but not just with the concerning the person with Alzheimer's, but also with the caregiver. You see myself, you see Carlos, um, you see
Janice.
Janice,
Hmm.
and you see the three of us still trying to connect with our individual passions, with the things that light us up. We're trying to still seek time for ourselves. And I think it's so important. The thing that I'm most passionate about is creating a different narrative of what caregiving can look like.
Hmm.
I think that the stereotypical caregiver is always self-sacrificing, always giving of themselves, kind of putting themselves on the back burner. They're tired, they're exasperated, but that's what you do. That's a caregiver. You give your all because you love this person. And though I agree, you also can love yourself. You
100%.
also can continue to seek out um, the evolution of your own personal interest and continue to build a life again differently, but still a life. And I think that you see that in the film. And that is something that I hope that people take away is the new vision of what caregiving can look like. And I think also what's important to see that is to see the diversity in experiences, to see the diversity in ages. A lot of people look at me and they think I'm younger than I actually am. And they also are like, wow, you're so young to be a caregiver and what have you. But there are people even younger than me. There are people
Hmm.
in their 20s that are caregivers for their parents,
Yeah.
there are caregivers for their grandparents. And so to kind of open up the concept of what a caregiver looks like and realize that one day it could be you. Your
Hmm.
life doesn't look like that at all. You, who you are right now, doesn't look like a caregiver, but it could be you one day. And to just keep an open mind and continue to learn about this disease so that if, God forbid, it does end up encountering your life, you understand that you can do this. You can be there for them, and you can also continue to be there for yourself.
I love that summary.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrea, I can tell you really thought about that and I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's something that I am very conscious about for myself every day because I know how this journey can swallow you up and it can drain you
Yeah.
mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially.
Yep.
And not every caregiver who is a caregiver wants to be a caregiver, is naturally a caregiver. So then when you tack onto it just the process of caregiving and having to turn your life upside down, it can be very, very heavy.
Yes.
And people see that I make light of some things or bring some like sarcasm and some hope and some joy into some things, but not every caregiver can find that, can
100%.
find those. And so I think just bringing a holistic view to the entire experience and normalizing that if you hate this right now, that's okay. If
Hmm.
you don't feel like this is something you're naturally good at right now, that's okay. We're just humans thrown into something that we did not ask for or anticipate or really, really understand, and we will figure it out together.
I love that. I think we should wrap on that. Andrea,
Sounds good.
thanks for being here.
Thank
It's
you.
awesome. Send us all your links so we can get them in the description of the video and the podcast. And I'm looking forward to everybody seeing not just this interview, but also the movie. I think it's super impactful, and I hope it really gets out there and reaches people who need it or who don't need it yet, but might need it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.